We are live. We are live. Welcome to College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Flugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our channel. Smash that like button. If you like our content, share the video with your family and friends. If you want to donate to this college football rebel outpost of a channel with a donation, hit the $ where you make a comment, and I'll get to you super chat as quick as I possibly can. Welcome everybody, and I mean everybody. Welcome in to the studio that sits on the corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to become a legend with your comments and with your phone calls later in the show. I am going to try to do the best I can. The fat guy from Minnesota, old and cranky. I'm going to do the best job of that I can to balance this live show between being kind, being patient, being humbled, being a good person, versus being absolutely 100% blunt, authentic, and tell you how it is from my perspective. Now, I expect the same from you all. I'm going to get a lot of you upset. In fact, there's going to be a lot of people opening up this live show, taking a look at the title and saying, I ain't listening to that. There's going to be some of you that are going to hang about 5 minutes and say, yeah, all right. Greg is a moron. His cheese have slipped off his cracker a long time ago, which is, both of those statements are true. And for the rest of you that hang around, a lot of you are going to disagree with me. And that is absolutely fine on this national college football YouTube channel. The title of the live show today is simply the so-called oncoming creation of a Super League is one bad joke. As many of you know, and I'm going to make it perfectly clear once again right now, since the beginning of when we started this YouTube channel, I've always said, yeah, there is the possibility of the SEC and the Big Ten breaking away. Yes, that could happen in 2030, 31. All I said it wasn't going to happen in 2026. Now, a lot of people out there, Greg said a breakaway is never going to happen, Greg said a breakaway. No, I did say it could possibly happen, and I think the chances have gone up a little bit. I don't think it's the chalk by any means. But I've always said 2030, 2031, it wasn't going to happen in 2026, like some Einsteins out there on X declared it was going to happen. It was never going to happen. But the breakaway, if you want to call that the possible breakaway of the SEC and the Big Ten, both picking up a little bit more schools and breaking away, if you want to call that a Super League, go, okay, fine. That is a Super League. That could happen. But again, the term Super League is now the catch-all of everything. But mostly it is used when people are describing the future of 48 to 60 teams all under one umbrella, possibly all under one media rights. Yeah, some schools would get paid more according to the brand value. Some would let, but it's all together. We play in regions. We go back. There are no more conferences. There are reporters believing, and I'm glad they're putting it down here. There are people saying they don't believe there's going to be any more football conferences in 30 and 31. That motto is going away. That is one bad joke. That's not happening. Again, I told you all, I'm going to do the best I can to have a balance. I'm going to try to be kind, patient, humble, respectful. But I got this other thing that's going over this shoulder. Holy smokes. That's the devil behind this shoulder. The angel is losing right now because the devil's saying, Craig. Look, I am going to be absolutely blunt. And I'm going to try to take the hard edges off. The Big Ten ain't going away. The Big Ten Football Conference is not going away. The SEC Football Conference is not going away. The Big 12 Football Conference is not going away. The ACC Conference is going to be looking differently, but it's probably not going to go away. These G5 conferences are not all going to get together and not be a there are going to be changes. There are going to be changes, but the Big Ten is not going away. Holy smokes. Now, the next question you might have is, Greg, you're picking on the lowest hanging fruit. Greg Nobody is saying, nobody's declaring what you're, oh yeah, they are. Oh yeah, they are. I have read 3 college football reporters put that out there just today. And I got examples. And these are fine people. They're very intelligent people. But I've also got to tell you, I have been in this game for a long time. There is a reason we broke the USC story. There is a reason why we broke the Big Ten Notre Dame story. There are reasons we have broke the Colorado and these other stories. I did an episode earlier today. Episode 424. If you haven't watched it, go check it out. It's talking about the ACC, their new unequal revenue sharing, and how that might be replicated. It's on the cutting edge. It could change the future. And there was one point in that article that the person who wrote the Sportical article asked a source in the Big Ten, could you ever, I'm paraphrasing, you can please watch the episode, but paraphrase that every time they asked a Big Ten source, could there be teams removed? Could Purdue be removed? And the sources always say, no, never. And then the reporter said in this article, never is a very long time, which I always say. But I'm going to be blunt with you guys. I'm fortunate, very fortunate to have been able to have a relationship with people in the Big Ten. Not just talking to them, a relationship. Having sushi and Sapporo beer. If you bring up the possibility of the Big Ten kicking out of school, if you bring up the possibility that they would cut the legs under from a Northwestern or Purdue, they will laugh at you. They won't take you seriously. Do you know why that is? Because it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. The only way that a Purdue, Ohio State, the only way they are not conference mates anymore, and they've been, Ohio State became a member in 1919, 106 years. Purdue and Ohio State have been conference mates. The only way they are not conference mates anymore is if Ohio State, the Big Ten brands and the big SEC brands, 20 years from now, 15 years from now, it's not going to happen 5 years from now. But if it happens in the next generation, 20, 25 years from now, if the top Big Ten SEC brands combine with each other to create this true Super League, that is the only way it's going to happen. I'm going to get to one of these articles real quick. But again, the same people who argue that there are going to be bottom schools in the SEC, bottom schools in the Big Ten going to be kicked out of the conferences, or they're going to have a lot of their revenue taken away, just like what happened in the ACC. But then the next discussion is, but Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, they're going to be for a Super League. Oh, yeah, they're going to be for a Super League. Where there are no more conferences and the schools play within their region, geographic region, it makes no logical sense whatsoever. Why would Ohio State, why are they, in accordance to, and I could name I'm not going to name all the reporters here, but according to, and people on X and on the message boards, according to their logic, Ohio State could be planning a way to take more money away from Purdue. Okay, that this could be happening, right? This could be happening, right? Because Purdue is, they're dead weight. Rutgers is dead weight. Northwestern is dead weight. Maryland is dead weight. Minnesota is dead weight. Illinois is dead weight. Indiana is dead weight. But yet the Buckeyes and Michigan, they're all going to have this creation called the Super League where there's 60 teams, and they're going to happily take on the risk of bringing on the Big 12 and ACC schools that have not had a 105-year relationship with the university. Ohio State, who's got research grants, mission statements all mixed in with the great engineering school of Purdue, but they're gonna cut all that off, and they're gonna start up a relationship with a ACC, Boston College, any Big 12 school. That's gonna happen. A Super League. Let me get to an article here. I thank everybody for coming on in. I do appreciate it very, very much. Ryan Willie, Wisconsin gets screwed again by starting on a Thursday night. The Gophers start every Thursday. We start every season on a Thursday night. It sounds like Wisconsin got moved on a Thursday night. They usually start on a Friday night. Wisconsin's had that Friday night slot. Thank you, Ryan Willie. I do appreciate your super chat. Thank you so much. $5 holler from Ryan Willie. Thank you so very much. Let's take a look at this. There are about, 3 or 4 different articles of the last 48 hours. I think people have taken this ACC situation, and a lot of them are, I don't think they are learning the, I don't know what's going on. I don't think they are, I could say a lot. We're gonna get back to it. Let's get through this article first. Mandel's mailbag. Stuart Mandel. Will Florida State, Clemson, and stay in the ACC? What's Ohio State's outlook? We're only going to go through one question in this mailbag. Okay, from John D. I don't know if that's Mr. Seminole, John D. here at PATC. He might have been the one that put the question in, but I do not know. I think Florida State and Clemson leaving the ACC will begin a Pac-12 type of evaporation, so I hope they stay. In the new revenue formula and game selection, though, enough to hold them in the conference. Mandel, Florida State and Clemson made out well in the settlements. For all the Florida State bluster about bolting the ACC, this whole saga began because it wanted a bigger slice of the league's revenue, and now it has that. Those two programs, along with Miami, excuse me, when it's good, are always going to be the league's leaders in TV ratings, which will now determine 60% of the conference media rights pot. ACC schools received an average of around $45 million from conference revenue in 22 and 23. My colleagues, Ralph Russo and Matt Baker, reported that the schools can now earn an extra $15 to $35 million between this and the postseason performance pool instituted last year. If so, they'll be on par with the SEC and the Big Ten, which is what they wanted all along. But of course, that won't temper the speculation. Those two might still leave. If anything, the settlement sets a target date of 2030 and 31, when the league's exit fee will drop to $75 million, and a departing member retains its media rights, which effectively renders the grant of rights mute. But while it's now more feasible for Florida State and Clemson to leave, they still need someone to invite them to leave. There has been no indication during the past 18 months that either the Big Ten or the SEC are pining to add those or any other ACC members. I'm going to circle back on that. We only got a couple more slides to go, but there's a lot that I can talk about right here. There has been no indication during the past 18 months that either the Big Ten or the SEC are pining to add those or any other ACC members. That is not entirely true. I'll circle back to that. The SEC already has schools in those states and more than enough big TV brands to keep ESPN happy. And the Big Ten is finding out how hard it is to keep 18 members spread across the country happy, especially in scheduling. But 2030 and 31 is a long way away in both college sports, and sports TV will presumably change quite a bit between now and then. Under the Big Ten and SEC's current media rights deals, there are barely enough TV windows to fit the schools they have. But what if everything moves to streaming by then? Then Netflix or Amazon says, give us abundance of games. And finally, in the article, I believe the traditional conference model in football will crumble by the early 2030s. Okay. This is where this is the point of the show that I've got to make a decision. Let me read that again. I believe the traditional conference model in football will crumble by the early 2030s. It's already too unwieldy. And the revenue sharing era will expose the chasms within conferences between schools that can afford to compete at the highest level or those that can't. Like what, Indiana? They just competed at the highest level. Len Perna, ringleader of the group spearheading a proposed FBS Super League, told me late last year they were targeting 2032. It might not be that exact model, but it will be something that generates even more money and makes more sense geographically. I believe the traditional conference model in football will crumble, and it's going to make more sense geographically in this Super League. This Super League's a bad joke. And if you need more evidence of it, and I'm going to go through a whole lot here. I am going to go through a whole lot. Here is the genius genetics, right? The guy who said that USC wasn't going to go to the Big Ten. The guy who said Colorado wasn't going to the Big 12. The guy who said Washington and Oregon weren't going to the Big Ten. He told everybody that Florida State had an invitation in hand to join the Big Ten when they got out. Remember that? Now, I believe the traditional conference model in football will crumble by early 2030s. Bingo! Suddenly there's not going to be a Big Ten football conference anymore? There's not going to be an SEC conference anymore? Are you out of your bleeping mind? Look, hold on. Okay, so I am sitting here, and I'm supposed to believe. I'm supposed to believe that Washington and Oregon, these two universities, Washington, this big research university in the city of Seattle, in which the Big Ten boosters wanted that city of Seattle. They wanted that city of Los Angeles. This is why the thing was leaked to me. It came from Los Angeles. There's so much cloak and dagger stuff going on. I reported to you all that Oregon and Washington were going to become Big Ten members 5 months from now or 5 years from now. I said that for 3 months, day in, day out, when others were saying that if Washington and Oregon were going to be Big Ten members, that would have already happened. Remember all that? Remember that Einstein from Wharton School saying that Oregon would never be a Big Ten member because the Big Ten presidents never... Remember all that stuff? So I'm supposed to sit here and believe that Washington and Oregon agreed to take half Big Ten media share. Half. For 5 years. And then after that, the Big Ten ain't going to be no more. Big Ten ain't going to be no more. In other words, Washington and Oregon aren't going to get what should be coming to them. Full membership, full investment, everything coming to them. Big Ten network, full payouts, tier one. They're not going to get any of that now because the Big Ten's going away. You mean we're going to go into Super League in 2031 and Oregon and Washington are going to be playing a West Coast Conference division? They're going to just play their neighbors once again? What are we? Where's the Big Ten network going? The Big Ten network's disappearing? That network that makes money for Fox and all these Big Ten institutions and helps spread exposure of their third tier of their Olympic sports. Oh, and let's get into the Olympic sports discussion. I told you guys this was going to be a very unpopular live show. It's going to be very unpopular. So you and I'm so humbled that so many of you have joined me today. But if you feel you have to tell off and you can't stand any more of this, it's my loss, not yours. Hopefully you come back for the next live show. You've got Einsteins out there. Get a load of this now. Get a load of this. Not only is the Super League coming and the schools are going to be divided geographically. Now we're going to have the Olympic sports, the baseballs, the softball teams, all these other sports, sponsored sports, they're going to be regionalized. They're going to be done regionally because we can't handle the travel, right? We can't handle the travel. So they're going to be regionalized. So let me get this straight. The SEC conference, they're going to be willing to break up their SEC baseball league? Really? You know, those schools, they travel, they play each other. Those baseball stadiums are full. They keep building more and more seats in the football stadium. You know, those baseball stadiums, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, they're pouring in all that money. It's glorious. It's beautiful to watch. Watch SEC Network. Go watch the baseball. It's absolutely beautiful. They're going to break all that up. Why? Why again? Oh, because of travel. Okay, they don't have to travel much. So they're not going to break up. Okay, so now you're thinking what? The Big Ten baseball is going to break up? You mean UCLA is going to be playing Arizona in their baseball conference games? UCLA is no longer going to be playing Big Ten teams? USC, Oregon, Washington, maybe even Rutgers in Maryland? One of the reasons why they were brought into the Big Ten is because of their Olympic sports. Because of UCLA softball, baseball, basketball. Suddenly the Big Ten is going to be okay with breaking up their baseball league because of regionality. Because the Big Ten's going away because the Super League's coming, right? None of this is happening. None of it. And if you and I'm good with you saying, Greg, it is happening, and these are the reasons why. Please put them in the comments and give me a call. We're going to have a great, fantastic discussion. But I'm going to tell you, there's absolutely no evidence of any of this happening. With all apologies to Brandon Marcello of 247, Stuart Mandel, and a couple other ones out there. And the Monty Show, Super League coming, Big Ten and SEC grabbing ACC and Big 12 schools and some G5 schools. There's no evidence of any of this happening. In fact, the opposite. These conferences have got more power than ever. I'm talking conferences decisions. We are going through a complete, total deregulation of who decides conference champions, the conferences themselves. They have more and more power. Everything that Brett Yormark is doing, every decision that Brett Yormark is making is for the interest of his institutions, of his conference. Everything that Petiti is pushing for is for his conference. Everything that Sankey is pushing for is for his conference. The G5 schools are battling each other in realignment and exposure. They're all looking out for their self-interest. Now, exactly when does this Super League happen? Oh, that's right. They're all going to agree that Len Perna's private capital, private equity is going to make everybody way more money to the point where everyone's going to say, I don't care who I play. Michigan's going to be just fine playing Western Michigan in their Super League division. There is no evidence that any of this is happening. None. Quite the contrary. The opposite. Greg Sankey says Super League. We're already a Super League. The SEC considers themselves a Super League. The SEC, okay. And let me get to okay, I want to get to this part right. Okay, where is it? Okay, let me get to this part. But while it's now more feasible for Florida St. Clemson to leave, they still need someone to invite them to leave. There has been no indication during the past 18 months that either the Big Ten or the SEC are pining to add those or any other ACC members. True and not true. One other aspect to all of this that I'm not buying is the belief that this thing is going to go on to 29 and 30 without no other realignment move. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it at all. And I got reasons. There are reasons that I got that I can't say, but there are a lot of reasons that I can say. When Stuart Mandel says nobody was pining for any of these ACC schools for the last 18 months, true. I mean, on June 15th of 2024, here at Peek Around the Corner, we had Petiti and Sankey leave the Holy Smokes Theater during the ACC drama because they did not have interest in the top targets of Clemson and Florida. That wasn't going to be their top targets. 6 weeks later, Brett McMurphy put out that big article, right? You remember that article? But you all, not all of you have forgotten, but a lot of people out there have forgotten. When Brett McMurphy, when he wrote that art, and I should have the article up and I don't, shame on me. Somebody can go look for it, send it to me on a DM, but remember the term Oppenheimer effect? Oppenheimer effect? Brett McMurphy put that in his article. If the schools could get out, if the schools could get out, and if it was more than just Florida State and Clemson, it could bring about an Oppenheimer effect. One other thing. And by the way, we are now there. These schools could get out. Now there's got to be interest on the other side, and Stuart Mandel says nobody's pining for these ACC schools. Well, that is not entirely true. That's not true. It's not true. It ain't true. And we'll get back to that in a second. And there's a lot of people out there now saying, well, the next realignment ain't going to be in the traditional conference model because the conferences are going away. Right? All the decisions that the Big Ten and the SEC and the Big 12 made, it ain't going to be, it's all washed away because of this grand Super League. Because these conferences are too unwieldy, and now we're going to have this beautifully run Super League where... But anyways, getting back to the pining of these ACC schools. Oh, there's interest. There's interest. There's interest. Now, I said, and I'm gonna stand. We said this 6 weeks before Brett McMurphy's article. There is interest. Florida State and Clemson are not the top targets for the SEC, but there will be some interest once they can get open. But let's take a look at North Carolina. When Stuart Mandel says there's no evidence of anybody pining for any of these ACC schools, with all due respect, that is incorrect. There is a pining for North Carolina. Now, I get a lot of pushback from a lot of people every time I do a show talking about North Carolina being the number one target for the Big Ten and the SEC if you don't include Notre Dame. I get a lot of pushback. I understand that. Florida State and Clemson are the biggest, most valuable football brands and total brands in the ACC. Completely understood. I've said it from day one. All that is correct. But the SEC and the Big Ten are pining for North Carolina. Remember when Brett McMurphy wrote that article? When he said, everybody who's talked to him said, talked about Florida State and Clemson. People forget about the other story that Brett McMurphy put out there. He said, but if North Carolina came open, the SEC would have interest. I do not have an example of Pete Thamel's tweets during the year, his postings, or his podcast with Reese Davis. But every time Pete Thamel has talked about the SEC targets, who does he have at number one? North Carolina. We got a North Carolina money perch gentleman who would not lean SEC. He would lean Big Ten. He's connected to the hockey. He's connected to the Division I hockey effort there in Chapel Hill. He will tell you that everybody he speaks to the SEC is very interested in North Carolina. So I don't believe that to be true. The pining. And if North Carolina, if there is any traction, let's say in the summer of 26, if there's any traction between North Carolina and SEC, that opens up the doors for other possibilities for Clemson and Florida State. Now, there's another aspect. See, I'm disagreeing with a lot of narratives that are being put out there. I got good reasons for it. There's this other aspect. We were able to get a hold of the Florida State money perch. This whole idea, Florida State and Clemson are going to make a whole lot more money, right, in the ACC. And it's going to be easier to compete in the ACC versus competing in the SEC. And so people are thinking, well, Florida State, they're probably not going to be, maybe their interest in going to the SEC or the Big Ten has waned. No. And let me explain. There is a lot into the decisions of the SEC and the Big Ten about a possible expansion. Is it economically feasible to their media partners? But from a Florida State perspective, if they can get this certainty of getting the higher ground, even if they do make a little bit less money in the SEC versus their ACC deal right now, they will take the SEC deal. Just think about the home games at Florida State. In the SEC schedule, 18 to 20 teams, 9 conference games. Think about that home schedule. Think about the tickets sold. Think about the merchandise. Think about the exposure. Think about the increased signage. Think about the increased sponsorship. Think about the extra money you can get on your local radio coaches show. Think about the commerce. Think about the road games that the Seminole fans can go to, travel to, bus, car, Uber, bicycle, for God's sake, in the SEC. Think about all that. And Clemson. If they have an opportunity to go to the SEC, if there is interest there, and I'm not talking right now, we might have to wait for North Carolina to flip the ignition switch, but come on. So again, there is another narrative that is being set out there by not one person, not two person, a lot of them. Now I'm going to really sound like a jerk. I'm going to sound like a jerk. But I'm trying to be accurate, right? And I would put our record against anybody. And one of those aspects is to be Sometimes you got to be a jerk. This is going to sound like a jerk, okay? I'm going to sound like a jerk. The Big Ten is interested in the Big Ten. They are. You know, when I wrote that post, and sometimes I wish I hadn't. I'm glad I did, but there are times that I wish I had. I wish I had not picked up that phone call when I was cleaning my car at the night of March 31st, 2022. When I was told about the Big Ten, USC, and then I tweeted about it for 3 months. After it was done, we got the Los Angeles Times article that came out. They interviewed me 4 times. Sometimes I wish I did not pick up the phone. But that was ruthless power move by the Big Ten. Ruthless. They stabbed their sister conference in the back and the front at the same time. When I posted that when I put that out on March 31st, you know how many? Everybody, almost everybody, Expansion Crush pretty much is the only person who backed me up on this. I was able to give information to Expansion Crush. He's in the chat room. But I got raked over the coals because remember at the time it was like, no, the Big Ten's only going to go to contiguous state. Contiguous. That is hard for a thick accent, Minnesota accent like me to say. Contiguous. You're only going to go to a contiguous state. You're not going to go over 2 time zones for USC. You're not going to stab the Pac-12 in the back. It was a ruthless move. But it was a move demanded by the self-interest of the Big Ten, their boosters, their institutions, their media partners. It was ruthless for Sankey to be talking to Bob Bowlesby when they're trying to form the college football playoffs. It was ruthless. They take the call from Texas and Oklahoma and say, yeah, just hold on the line. Then he talked to the other presidents. Yeah, we're going to get this done. As he's talking to Bob Bowlesby about this new college expanded from 4 to whatever number they were thinking about at the time, it was ruthless aggression. It was ruthless aggression for Brett Yormark to get up ahead of the Pac-12. Remember, Brett Yormark didn't even legally have the ability to have an exclusive discussion with ESPN and Fox. It was outside the window. Brett Yormark knocked on the door and said, let me in. I want to talk to you guys. Give me the ability to start this negotiations. Then the news came out that Fox and ESPN said, yeah, okay, Brett Yormark, we're gonna speed this up. We are going to open up the exclusive negotiation window. Brett Yormark started talking. Oh, boy. I said, oh, boy. Watch out, Pac-12. Get a deal done. If you don't get a deal done, your exposure, your legs of exposure is going to be ripped out from under you. On October 30, 2022, Brett Yormark got the deal done. It was ruthless aggression. And then the expansion moves. Remember the hot bubble of action? Colorado on May 7th? Remember I told you that I could not tell you it was a meeting, but on April 28th, I said from now to May 17th, hot bubble of action. On May 8th, they came on live and I said the Pac-12 just got a shot in the solar plexus and they're hanging by a thread. All of that was true. Brett Yormark, ruthless aggression. The SEC and the Big Ten having an advisory group, meeting together, trying to get a scheduling deal. Sankey going to a 9th conference game, trying to get more money out of it, being ready for more expansion. By the way, ruthless aggression. The idea that everybody's going to, with all this ruthless talk, with Brett Yormark finalizing a private capital deal. Looks like he's going to finalize it in the coming weeks. Ruthless aggression, something new. And suddenly everybody's going to be going, well, you know what? This Len Perna talking about, we're going to Super League. 60 to 72 teams, all under the same umbrella. We're going to regionalize baseball and softball. And none of that is happening. None of that is happening. We're going the opposite direction. I try to say this without being a jerk, but the Super League, the idea of a Super League outside of the Big Ten and the SEC, adding a few more teams and doing a breakaway, outside of that concept, the Super League is a bad joke that is not going to have it has a bad punchline. It's not going to happen, in my humbled opinion. There's no evidence for it. There's no logic for it. It makes no sense. There's a lot of things I don't know what's going to happen, right? I don't even know if the Big 12 is going to finalize that private capital. I don't know who the Pac-12 is going to add. Sacramento State, Texas State. I don't know if the ACC, North Carolina. Do not be surprised. Do not be surprised don't be surprised if we get some smoke. Some conferences pining for some of those ACC schools. The Oppenheimer effect, the Oppenheimer ripple effect. Don't be surprised if that happens within the next 18 months. There's going to be a lot of changes in college football, a lot of changes in college sports, but it ain't going to be this. It is not going to be this. The traditional conference model in football will crumble by early 2030s. That is not going to happen. Okay, we're going to take your phone calls. The monologue is over. Expedition Greg, if UNC would call the Big Ten or the SEC and say we're ready to join the Big Ten or SEC, we'll open their expansion immediately again. Thank you for the super chat, Expedition Greg. First of all, I do not know if there can be legally first-party talks happening today. Maybe they can. I'm only saying this because when we watched the Florida State Board of Trustees meeting, we had a live stream of it yesterday. The chairman of the board, Collins, says something to the effect it's going to take us 30 days to get all these documents signed, to get it all official. So I don't know. First party talks starting today or 30 days from now. But I'm not under the illusion. Let me say this a different way. I'm trying to gauge okay. There is no way on God's green earth, zero chance. There is no way on God's green earth, the moment that it can be done legally, and maybe it's already happened 24 hours ago, the moment it can be done legally, Bubba Cunningham and Big Ten, Bubba Cunningham and SEC are going to have discussions. First discussions, easy discussions. When can we set up a time? When can we trade some documents? We can just talk. They can talk. They can talk conference realignment. Lawyers can trade documents. There's no way on God's green earth that that's not going to happen, or if it possibly has already happened. There's no way that's not going to happen. There's no way the SEC is going to sit there and go, we're not interested in expansion right now. We got a lot of things happening here, right? We're trying to go to 9 conference games, a lot of political turmoil. I don't know if ESPN would give North Carolina the full freight. You know what? In the North Carolina State situation, you know what? We're not going to talk to North Carolina for 30 to 60 to 90 days. There's no way the SEC is going to have that position, because they got to look over they got to look in their periscope from Birmingham, Alabama, all the way to Rosemont, Illinois, and there's no way they're going to let the Big Ten have 90 days worth of talk with Bubba and the SEC not talking to Bubba. So you're going to have talks. You're going to have documents switch. You're going to have a lot of discussions. You're going to have lawyers meeting. It doesn't mean that expansion, that realignment is imminent. It doesn't mean that North Carolina is going to have the money to do it. It could be, if you get down to brass tacks, it could be North Carolina saying, Big Ten, what can you do for us on a loan, or the SEC? North Carolina is going to have those discussions before they finalize any other private capital, individual school stuff, or a conference-wide, or any other decisions that are going on in the ACC. They're at least going to have some discussions on where they are. And then the Big Ten and the SEC, their questions are not going to be, they're going to have a lot of questions to North Carolina that is about not North Carolina. In other words, Cranky Tiger, are UNC Clemson still holding hands? The discussions are going to be that Big Ten saying, well, you know that we've had interested in you for the last 25 years. We know we came a knocking on your door before we added Rutgers in Maryland. North Carolina turned Big Ten down. And, we've had this, we think you guys are great. You think we're great. Let's talk. But North Carolina, what would you need to happen? And, the Board of Governors, what does the Board of Governors need? What type of sell pitch do we need to make? Is there the North Carolina State backpack situation? Is there a Duke situation? Is there a Virginia situation? Is there a Virginia Tech situation? There's a lot to discuss. And they're not going to wait 9 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months to start talking. They're going to be talking now. USC, UCLA joined the Big Ten on June 30th, 2022. On March 31st, I was able to break the news that USC and the Big Ten were talking. It was real. It was so real that we've got tracked by the legal counsel, the right-hand man of Kevin Warren at the time. It was real. Even then, it was March, April, May, June, 4 months before they announced that it was official. So what could happen in the summer of 26 for North Carolina to leave the ACC in the summer of 27? Those talks are going to be starting now. Why wouldn't they? So when Stuart Mandel and others say, well, there's really nobody pining for these schools. True. I mean, the Big Ten and the SEC, they're working through a lot of things. They don't know what the future is. College football playoffs. But they're not going to be. But now they can talk. Okay, we're going to open up the phone lines here. 763-260-1333. Give me a call. Let me know how wrong I got it again. But my goodness, the Super League, no conferences? No. I believe the traditional conference model in football will crumble. Really? It might not be the exact model, but it will be something that generates even more money and makes more sense geographically. What makes more sense geographically? The Pac-12 made sense geographically, in the words of Stuart Mandel and a lot of other people. But because they were a one-region conference, they couldn't squeeze the value out of those schools. Arizona is more valuable in the Big 12 than they were in the Pac-12. Arizona State, the same thing. What makes sense geographically?
Call from
John Grove.
John Grove, the floor is yours. Thanks for calling, sir. I appreciate it.
Well, how are you doing, Mr. Flugar? It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's been a while. You haven't called in a while. What's going on, sir?
I've been caught up with a lot of busy stuff, but now we're kind of approaching the lighter portion of the year in terms of my work workspace, work stuff. So, yeah, I mean this whole crazy. It's starting to become some crazy stuff, but it's starting to occur a lot faster than anticipated as well. My question is, and I was listening to a little bit of it, in terms of revenue sharing and everything when it comes to the ACC and how we're going to see Clemson and Florida State get the most amount of revenue leaning towards them. Are we going to happen? It's not like full on super conference mode like a lot of the people I've been mentioning and like the whole monologue and everything like that. Are we going to kind of see like a little bit of a financial shift with the powers of the Big Ten and the SEC, knowing like, oh, we're Alabama and we're Georgia and we want to get most of its revenue rather than Mississippi State and Vanderbilt? Are we still kind of leaning with? Will we be leaning with that? What the Power 2 conference is, kind of similar to what the ACC is? Is there a time frame on that, or is that not going to happen?
I did an episode earlier today, 424. Go check that out when you get an opportunity. I do not believe that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to replicate what just happened in the ACC. I can see schools in the Big Ten and the SEC eating more of what they kill, right? Having some sort of success initiative within those two conferences. And if they're going to do unequal revenue sharing when it comes to the media payouts, I think it's going to be very minor. But we're not going to see where Clemson could make $120 million more in the next 6 years, $20 million per year projected, versus another ACC school and have that type of gap. That's not going to happen in the SEC and the Big Ten, in my opinion. That's just...
Well,
Go ahead.
You touched on the success initiative that the ACC is about to have. And part of it as well is just like, well, if you're not performing up to your standards or if you're just not delivering in terms of exposure or anything like that, you're going to get less of the pie. Whereas I think for the SEC, they're able to have that success initiative, but they're not taking away the revenue of several of the smaller institutions, or the Big Ten for that matter as well, because they're going to have such cash invasion from the TV media partners,
it's just okay. So the name of my episode 424 was this unequal revenue sharing per viewership is not a magic potion for the ACC. What we're going to see is, I mean, it's, the Clemson, they got above the stratification line. Florida State did. Miami's going to get close to it. It's not really even going to help North Carolina, which is a whole nother story. But those three schools are going to receive a lot more money, right? But the pie did not grow. The money's going to come from the bottom of the ACC schools. Some of those schools are going to be averaging $7 million less per year now, okay? And what that is going to happen is those schools are going to be even more hard pressed to be able to compete. I mean, there are reasons why there are schools at the bottom of these conferences, because geographic reasons. I mean, not everyone can be a top team in a conference, right? So those teams are going to be caught in their own death spiral. They're going to fall behind. There are going to be ACC schools when it comes to revenue generation. They're going to fall behind all the Big 12 schools. They're going to fall behind even more the bottom half of the Big 10, the bottom half of the SEC. The gap is going to grow between the bottom of the ACC and the other conferences. What does that do to the ACC? It becomes even more of a non-competitive football conference. That's not going to help ratings. That's not going to help reputation. That's not going to help perception. And that's not going to help the ACC if they go into the next media rights, which is another reason why I do not believe that Clemson, Florida State, Miami, even though they're going to be getting extra money, even though they're going to be more happy now than they were before, even though the ACC is going to have less competition than they were to join the SEC, I don't think they're going to stop. If they have an opportunity to go to the Big Ten or the SEC, they're going to take it, because the ACC itself is a withering conference because of this deal. It helped those top brands for the next 4, 5, 6 years, no question about it. But it did not help the health of the ACC beyond those years or even now. So again, another reason why I don't think I don't think there is any chance that the next realignment is going to take until the end of 29 and 30. I believe it's going to happen before that.
Well, I mean, you're talking about kind of the ACC fizzling out a little bit. We're starting to see it more so on the basketball front, where it looks as if they're about to get only 3 or 4 teams into the field, while the rest of the conferences are nearing double figures in terms of teams getting into the tournament. And we're starting to see a little bit similar there with football, with the bowl results and everything. I mean, take those results with a grain of salt, because a lot of teams are with their different situations, but it kind of seems as if we're kind of leaning towards that pattern as well. What do you know, any like initial revenue difference there would be between the bottom ACC teams and the Big 12 by any chance?
Well, if they're averaging $7 million less, they're going to be a few $1 million less money than the Big 12 schools. Because right now I think they're going to get a couple more $1 million, a little bit more than the Big 12 schools, but they're going to be getting less now. And by the way, those ACC schools, a lot of those ACC schools, they sponsor more sports. They have more commitments. They have more scholarships. They're going to already have less rev share money for football than your Oklahoma States, than your Baylor, than your TCUs, than your Kansas States. They're already Boston College sponsors, I don't know. They're in the high 20s or the low 30s when it comes to sports. I mean, so when it comes to football, a lot of those ACC schools are going to be investing already less than a lot of those Big 12 schools. And now those ACC schools are going to be getting an average of $7 million less per year, projected wise, if historic averages, keep continuing. I mean, that is a big blow. And ultimately, that is going to hurt the ACC perception wise, on the field, wins and losses, bowl games. And you don't look, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, right? These big time programs, Texas, they've already make over $100 million more than their brethrens in the SEC and the Big Ten. When you calculate the entire athletic department revenue, they're making way more money already. They know that the middle and the bottom of their SEC Big Ten brethrens, if they can keep them healthy, if they get the big media money, if we keep this in-house You know, if we battle for the playoff distribution money, if we battle for, you know, even the Big Ten's even looking at private capital, their own little small deal. They want to keep their entire conference healthy, right? So I'm not sure.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, that's another thing as well, because you were talking about kind of the possibilities of the ACC. Like, don't leave out the ACC when it comes to private equity. I think having FSU and Clemson, giving Clemson and FSU the opportunity of potentially leaving early and lowering that exit fee, I think that kind of puts a kneecap into the chances for the ACC to get towards private equity, because you look at several of those firms and several of those investment firms, and you just look at their situation saying, well, why would we be pouring in this much money when we know that Florida State and Clemson are going to be gone here over the next few years?
Yep.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you also got the Big 12. Again, you mentioned it, like a bunch more stable foundation in terms of security and everything like that. They're looking more towards private equity, Redbird investment, possibly up there. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I appreciate the call, Greg. Oh, also, I'm going to Dublin, Ireland for the Week 0 K-State Iowa State game as well.
Beautiful.
Uh-huh.
That's beautiful. When you're in the football stadium or the soccer stadium, and when you're watching the game, we're going to be doing a watch party. So you got to make one comment in the chat room if you get the opportunity. If
they have Wi-Fi at that stadium, I should be able to make that work.
Got it.
For whatever reason, you go to like several of these countries, and they're kind of tedious with their Wi-Fi plans and everything like that. But that's another conversation for another day. But appreciate it, Greg.
Got it. Appreciate you, sir. Thanks for the call.
Have a good night.
You too.
Call from
Wild Ute.
Wild Ute is on the line. The floor is yours. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm getting ready to watch Dampier here, Utah U's quarterback. Headed into spring football. What is there any buzz? Is there any buzz about your new transfer quarterback?
Well, he's a stud.
He's a stud. There you go.
He really is, and like it's going to change the complexion of the Ute offense.
Yeah, he
completely. And like they're going to be more dual threat. He's escapable. But I think a lot of Ute fans are just trying to keep their mouths shut this offseason a little bit more to surprise the Big 12, because I think it's going to be a big season this year. But we'll be more on the down low.
I'll pick up the slack. I'll talk a lot more Gopher smack this offseason. And then be humbled when the season starts. But go ahead, sir.
Super League. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Super League. And I did hear you speak to the USC situation, right?
Yeah.
And you spoke to poaching the Pac-12 and the Big Ten being ruthlessly aggressive.
Ruthless, yes.
And also looking out for its own self-interest, right?
Yeah.
And it got me thinking, okay, so from USC's standpoint, why did they jump to the Big Ten after being in the Pac 10, 12 for 100-plus years? Like, why did they make the move?
I think a couple reasons. One, they wanted to get above the economic stratification line to be able to compete at the highest level. Right. They wanted to make sure they had the best exposure for their front porch of the university to get out of that Pac-12 regional conference web that they were in. And I think the Big Ten academic research brand, the Pac-12 brand was also fantastic for the university. But I think that might have interested them as well. But I think the economic stratification line and more exposure, I think is what was the turning point for USC to finally give the Big Ten that serious phone call.
Yeah, and I think that those same reasons are why a Super League makes sense.
Okay.
Apply that same type of thinking to Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, anyone that would be involved in a Super League, at least be a target for Super League. And you're looking at financial optimization, money piece, right? USC they left their conference that had been in forever, that they never, when Utah joined the Pac-12, it was supposed to be a 100-year decision.
Yep.
Like it's supposed to be a done deal. No way the Pac-12 could ever fall apart. How could it ever fall apart?
Yep.
And I hear the same type of stuff a lot from Big Ten land.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's basically the same type of stuff. It would never happen. No way. Nope. But then like the market forces coming into bear here. Mm-hmm. And like consider like if it's money, exposure, prestige, which basically kind of spoke to, I think a Super League actually optimizes your financial position most. If you have an ideal like a top 40 team Super League with the biggest brands backed by private capital, you're going to have more payouts than you would in the Big Ten or the SEC. With brand optimization, with more consolidation. You talk about consolidation all the time. True consolidation is a Super League. That is the ultimate consolidation. And if everybody's out for their own self-interest, like the Big Ten Conference was, stab the Pac-12 in the back, why wouldn't a team in the Big Ten stab the Big Ten in the back? If it's all about self-interest, and I do agree with you on that, really, at the end of the day, could it be about all money and exposure? Could the Super League provide even more exposure and significantly more money? That is the challenge to like the conference model. And like I get, you've got your relationships and everything. You've got Big Ten Academic Alliance, but there's no claim here that the Big Ten would just blow up. It would exist. It just wouldn't be a football conference anymore, or the iteration of a football quality conference like we're talking about. This would be a football breakaway only. And so you could still have the relationships, you could still have the Big Ten Alliance, Academic Alliance, but you could be ruthlessly aggressive and say, I'm the Ohio State Buckeyes, I'm going to leave and take care of my own self-interest and get paid double in a Super League and get more exposure out of it too. And then I'll keep the rest of my sports in the Big Ten Conference. That's the logic behind Super League.
Okay, so I tend to agree with a lot of what you just said. Surprisingly enough. I mean, but again, it gets back to a Super League with what I would call a breakaway, I think could happen 5 years from now. You know, the Big Ten and the SEC breaking away and picking up a few more teams, and that be a breakaway. And if people want to call that a Super League, that's fine. But I said a Super League of 48 to 60 teams. I don't see it.
No.
I don't see this. Okay, you talk about how USC, they got full freight, them and UCLA. But Washington and Oregon only got half. The money wasn't there. And if you're talking about like capital, private capital coming in and all that, sure, I can see that happening too. But I would see that in the more of a SEC Big Ten bringing in private capital instead of bringing, I don't, like, again, Wild You, I don't understand the following logic. There's a lot of this, and you guys do a great job in College Football Mafia show where you're saying the milkers, the suckers, whatever, okay?
Sure.
And it's like, you know, Ohio State might be taking a little bit more money from the lower brand Big Ten schools, right? Or Alabama might doing that to the SEC. But then on the next hand, people are arguing for a Super League of 40 teams, 48 teams, where they're bringing on these other schools that the Buckeyes don't have a 106-year relationship with. And suddenly, Ohio State is going to be lifting these other non-Big Ten schools up to a higher level. I see, that logic doesn't fit with me. Why would they undercut Purdue? But no, suddenly they're going to be for risking, because the higher value schools are going to be risking the most when it comes to this private capital money coming in. Why are they taking on the brunt of the risk with schools that they don't have over 100-year relationship with? That logic just, I can't make that work. Go ahead.
That's not even consolidation.
Huh?
You always talk about consolidation.
Yeah.
You talk about true consolidation. That is not consolidation. That's not realistic. Realistic consolidation is actually a real consolidation where you're pinching down a Super League to 40, 30 teams. You wouldn't have 60 teams. You just have new milkers.
Well, but a lot of people, when they're talking Super League, that's the number that they're 48 to 60. That's why I started the show with. So everyone has a different term, right, for Super League.
Sure.
That's another problem here. Super League. Okay, let's stick with what do you want to stick with? The 40 team.
I think 40 teams makes sense, and I think it's football only. I don't think it's a breakaway with other affiliations like your academic alliance or even basketball necessarily.
But if you go football, so if you go football only, again, who is like the scheduling of this 40-team conference? I mean, it is like I'm gonna throw out Michigan. Who is Michigan playing in their I don't know how to even say it, conference games, or who's on Michigan's schedule?
Yeah, so they'd have a regional pod of other Super League teams. So that'd be Ohio State and Michigan State, Penn State. So basically a lot of the core Big Ten in the region. Just the top brands of the Big Ten and the top brands of the SEC, with a few sprinkled in Big 12 and a few sprinkled in ACC. Just basically the highest valuation brands based on third-party private capital valuations. That's who would be invited to this club. This is just a new club. It's a new football club. And that makes sense to me because that's financial optimization. Because you're actually less mouths to feed because you kick out some of the SEC and the Big Ten, and all of a sudden you're really packaging in the best brands for the most eyeballs.
Well, who are you kicking out in the Big Ten?
We don't need to get out. I'm not going to get into that topic today.
So I'm being serious here because there seems to be this there seems to be this thought that there's a lot of Big Ten teams or a handful of SEC teams that are so low of value that if we bring on a bunch of Big 12, not a bunch, but a sprinkled, like the word you use, some Big 12 and ACC teams, suddenly it's better off for Ohio State and Michigan and Georgia and Alabama. And I gotta completely disagree with that. Other than like a Florida State, if you want to talk about brand value, a Florida State,
Clemson would jump in there too.
Clemson, possibly Miami. But again, that gets back. Okay, so this gets back to my version of the Super League. The only Super League that I see happening is the breakaway. Is the Big Ten SEC breaking away, adding a few more teams. There'll be like 40 team. If you want to call that a Super League, that's fine. I call that a breakaway. But I look, the USC left the Pac-12, right, to go to the more valuable Big Ten. That is quite different than what you're suggesting. That 80% of the Big Ten leaves. We just have to agree to. I cannot.
That's fine.
I can't see Ohio State, Michigan saying, okay, here are the 3-4 bottom Big Ten teams. You're gone, and we'll replace it with. I mean, good. Again, I gotta say it. I mean, some of those big value ACC schools that we've been talking about for the last year and a half, they don't have a lot of support among Big Ten presidents. So suddenly
for
they're
a
going
lot
to
of
kick
reasons,
out.
but like you got to keep in mind, this football Super League would be football brand. Who cares about academics at that point? It wouldn't be aligned with academics or anything else. The Big Ten would still exist. It's just your football power. That's it. This is strictly a football-only league.
Okay,
so it doesn't matter about your academics.
Yeah. Well, it does in the Big Ten. It does. Look, It's not. Okay. I'll give you an example. Obviously, in this 40-team Super League of Wild Ute, who, by the way, thanks for calling. He's a genius. He's a whole lot smarter than I am. In this Super League thing, you're basically going to be kicking out Northwestern, correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, I'm going to tell you
and
something.
Purdue.
What?
Purdue.
Let's just stick with Northwestern. That ain't going to happen. It just isn't going to happen. It isn't. And if it does, I will take the big L on this show. I'll go on Wild Ute. I will wear a Wild Ute, whatever you want me to wear, the colors, the jerseys, whatever. There ain't no way in hell Michigan is kicking out Northwestern. It ain't happening. And you might say, well, it's only a football league. No one's getting kicked out.
What? That's the thing. That's why I got to push back. No one's getting kicked out. They're just not invited.
Northwestern is building a $800 to $1 billion football stadium. They're going to want to play Big Ten schools. It's a Big Ten city. The corporate office is right across the corner. Northwestern's been there for. Northwestern is going to be playing Michigan in football. It's just going to happen. Unless they are. I'm not even going to say unless. That is my... I understand what you're saying. Greg, it's about football. Football, highest brand value. Northwestern gives so much value to Michigan and the other Big Ten universities in the billions of dollars. They're not kicking Northwestern.
Northwestern. Are you sure? And they wouldn't be kicking them out, though.
Okay, but they're being kicked out of the football conference. They're being kicked out of the football, which is big exposure, which is the front porch of the university. They're not going to do that to Northwestern.
Ruthless aggression. Ruthless aggression. We're going back to USC leaving the pack, and we can disagree, and we will disagree on this one, but that's exactly the crux. That's why everyone's talking about this, because it's all about ruthless aggression. Anyway, let somebody else jump on and everything.
I appreciate it, my man.
Yeah, see ya.
Yeah, you got it. Wild Ute, 40 team. He's got SEC teams, Big Ten teams get kicked out.
From
Rock and Rant.
Rock and Rant. The floor is yours.
Hey, Greg, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. I love the phone call from Wild Ute. I did say, look, people are going to disagree. Let me have it. And he let me have it with both barrels. Rock and Rant. The floor is yours. Thanks for calling, my man. Appreciate it.
I think my boy Ute wants to just get payback for the pain of Utah's transition over. But I had one point and then I had one question, and then I'll get off because we definitely talked a bunch the other day. But one thing, in terms of, does Florida State or Clemson or whoever wants to potentially go to another conference despite getting all this extra money? I think one of the things, the reporters who focus on the business aspect of everything, they tend not to be the reporters who are in the day-to-day of, like, recruiting, as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the main reasons that Florida State, Clemson want to close that money gap, right? It's because they want to compete not for ACC titles, so they want to do that, but mainly because they want to compete for national titles. And in recruiting, even in an NIL era, even if you have a great NIL, so do some of your competitors. And the straight-out fact is, a few years into this, there are top recruits that basically look aside to the ACC or Big 12 in favor of the SEC and Big 10, and that's only going to get potentially worse the minute that certain conferences have 4 AQs versus 2. So that's not something they ever really say, but if you're really trying to compete for national titles, that's a major issue. So, like, even if you could be the big fish in a small pond of the ACC, and maybe you're like within $5 or $10 million year in and year out, and you can manage that, that doesn't really help you if your ultimate goal is to win a national title if you can't see the talent recruitment. And yes, maybe a year or two down the road, you can go down the portal side and acquire some of those people. But it's kind of becoming clear that you have to have a really good balance of excellent recruiting and really smart portal acquisition. So money aside, that's like an issue if you're Florida State or Clemson, even if you can get all of the money you want. If you're Miami, if you're anybody who wants to do that, if you're Utah or Colorado in the Big 12. So that's one thing I think those reporters who specialize in this area just don't ever seem to account for, right?
Yeah.
Because they're just different people in those organizations who focus on this, unless it's like the number one recruit in the class, the top 5 guys in the portal. So I don't know if you have a take on that.
Well, my take is I agree with you. Absolutely.
And then the other question to me, I think the lingering one is, and I don't know if we will get to know because it's come out before or it will come out in public records, is what exactly did ESPN do or not do in terms of, yes, they have expanded the media deal into 2036, but are there a contingency if the top 4 brands leave and they backfill? Like the whole composition clause thing. There's a lot of conversation going on about that today. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that when when Stanford and Cal and SMU came into the ACC, they didn't get a full share of TV revenue, but the ACC got 3 essentially full shares of TV revenue from ESPN for adding 3 new members, even though 2 of them took 30% for a certain period of time and SMU took 0%. So that if that's true, then the next question is, hey, did Wake Forest and everybody else get told that if your top 4, 6, 2 brands leave, you're still getting the original deal paid out, or is there some part of the deal that would lower the price that the payment if your top 4 brands leave, and therefore, what's really happening with that deal? Like, do they backfill and get Tulane and Memphis, and now all of a sudden they're still making $50 million in 2036? Like, that is the question that either we haven't heard, maybe you've heard, maybe you can pry. But to me, that's going to be it's going to tell us whether a school like Louisville tries to jump into the Big 12 in a year or two.
Yeah, that is a great point. I haven't heard. Obviously your Wake Forests of the world, they got something from this, some sort of security. They got at least 12 votes out of it. Schools were voting for this, knowing that they did not have a shot to get into the Big Ten of the SEC. They still voted for this. Whether, I don't know, I can't imagine they would get the same type of media payout. It's got to be adjusted if they lose the Miami, the top
I don't know
brands.
if it does, though. That's the thing. In theory, I think that's 100% right?
Yeah.
But the deal that the ACC did could have been so bad, right?
Yeah.
That when ESPN looks to 2034 and they go, okay, this deal might be built around the 10 lower TV draws schools plus these 3 others, in 2036, that would be a pittance because inflation is X and Y and we're fine still. The flip side is there could have been a contingency that took hey, if they're going to make 54, 55 million with the 4% escalators in 2036, maybe they did get an update, like you're saying, of, hey, we have to adjust it down. But if their adjustment down is to not getting 54 million, but you're getting 35 million based off of what the rumors are today for Mountain West deal, Pac-12 deal, that would still be pretty massive since those deals are likely going to be $10 million or under, as we're hearing. And even if they were to grow 5 or 10% a year into 2036. So to me, it's less about what Wake Forest is getting, but what is that contingency or lack thereof might be the thing that makes other schools in the middle try to act sooner.
Yes. That is a fascinating question. It's that Louisville in a couple of years. What are they? it's what do they believe they are going to receive when it comes to ACC payouts if X, Y, and Z leaves the conference versus what they perceive that they can get in the Big 12. And there's no doubt that Louisville and the Big 12 are going to talk, if they haven't already, because they had third-party talks months ago. So,
right, you do not want to be team 9 in the ACC. That would be team 1 if 8 left for 3 conferences.
yeah.
Right, and the difference between 8 and 9 could be who moves first. Like somebody could be the Colorado, and that's like finding out about that TV portion is like I think the trigger for that. Like that's just a take, and if you're able to dig and find out, or maybe we get public news about it, I think that will further that conversation too.
Yeah.
All right, my friend.
All right. Appreciate it,
Have
man.
a great day.
Great. Rock and Rant. Great call, sir.
Thanks, man.
Wild Jude and Rock and Rant. Great calls. Brilliant. Now, getting back to the ruthless aggression of the USC, there was a difference of, I don't know, what, $30 million, $35 million moving from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, plus future earnings. I mean, there was a lot of incentive for them to leave. Now, if you're talking about ruthless aggression.
Call from
Mullen.
Just give me a minute to finish my thought, and I'm going to go right to you, sir. If you're talking about ruthless aggression for like a Michigan going into a 40-team Super League, and they're going to knock the legs out from under Northwestern and add like a Utah. Or if you don't want to use the Utah, Colorado, whatever example you want to use, how much more money is Michigan going to make with the Colorado edition or Utah edition and then cutting out Northwestern? I mean, how much more money is Michigan actually going to make? I mean, they might not make any more money because Northwestern, I mean, Chicago, whatever. Okay, but let's say you're going to make a couple more $1 million spread across the 40. I mean, Michigan, I think hell would freeze over before Michigan has anything to do with Northwestern not being in the same football conference with the Michigan. Same with Wisconsin. Same with Ohio State, but Moen is probably going to tell me how wrong I got it once again. Go ahead, Mr. Buckeye. The floor is yours.
Well, you got that part right, Greg. You're 100% right. All due respect to Wild Ute, he doesn't understand the way the Big Ten works and operates and the fraternity and brotherhood and sisterhood we have with our universities. I love West Virginia University, love Morgantown, have family ties to WVU. Pitt's a great school, storied program, Heisman trophies, national championships. I don't want to play Pitt or West Virginia. I want to play Purdue. I want to play Indiana. I want to play Northwestern. And more than anything, Greg, I want the Illybuck Trophy to be an annual game. We should be playing Illinois every year. I don't want to play less Big Ten teams.
Yeah,
I want to play more Big Ten teams.
And that's what the Big Ten schools, they want to play each other more often. That's why they got rid of the divisions. Same with the SEC, by the way. They want to play each other. So, the only team that you don't want to play, Moen, the only team that you don't want to play in the Big Ten is who? The Minnesota Golden Gophers on October 4th, baby. Let's go!
I just don't want to play at Purdue on the road at night.
Yeah.
That's my thing.
Yes.
But,
yes.
I get where Wild Ute's coming from. He saw his conference collapse. And I would be, I would have to mention that, yes, the Big Ten was ruthless in that, but USC and UCLA called us first. They did. If you send free pizza to somebody's house, you're going to tell me you're not eating that pizza, Greg?
Well, the fat guy from Minnesota will have cheese pizza if you send it to my house. But if you put if you mix the meat and cheese together, if you put the pepperoni or sausage in there, I am kicking that pizza out, and I'm kicking you out of the fat guy from Minnesota's household. Go ahead, sir.
Still, it's what I call the free pizza doctrine, Greg. USC and UCLA wanted out of the Pac-10. What were we supposed to do? Say, oh, no, you go talk to the Big 12 and the SEC and the ACC, and we'll leave the entire media market of Los Angeles alone. Come on. I mean, it is what it is, but the Big 10 is not the Pac-10. The Big 10 is not the ACC. The Big 10 is not the Big 12. We've never had a team leave us. Well, I take that back. We had Chicago choose to not focus on athletics.
Michael Smith in the chat says, no one cares about Northwestern Stadium except for Northwestern. That's not entirely true. I mean, look, Northwestern is building a stadium, a 35,000 stadium that's going to be quite unique. That's going to have the overhanging edges. It's going to be unique. And when it opens up, I think it's going to capture a lot of imagination out there. But Northwestern, I mean, they built that football stadium to play in the Big Ten Conference. They did not build that football stadium to play against, I don't know who you, in this, if they're not in this Super League, I don't know, they'd be playing who, Kansas State, whatever. They built that football stadium to play Big Ten schools. And by the way, when that football stadium is completed, just like their beautiful athletic village, it will have zero debt. And when you look at the valuations, when people came out with a rough draft of private capital, private equity evaluations of all these athletic departments, when that football stadium is complete, Northwestern's valuation is going to skyrocket. So in other words, if the Big Ten as a whole ever does a big private capital project, private capital, Northwestern is actually going to be actually more valuable than a whole lot of, I mean, pretty much everybody out there outside of the Big Ten and the SEC. So again, another go ahead, Moen.
Yeah, I can't wait as an Ohio State fan to go to the new Northwestern Stadium. Because, they say all the Ohio State fans are just pee on everything. So, new stadium, we got to pee all over it. But, I mean, look, it's tough to explain to people who haven't been in the Big Ten, who aren't fans of the Big Ten schools, who aren't alumnus of the Big Ten schools. It's just almost a way of life for us.
Yeah.
And I don't want that torn away because, and I get it, it's not fair. Life's not fair, Greg.
Yeah, it's not.
There's going to be schools that are going to be towards the bottom. It's not Utah's fault. Utah didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
But it's just the way the cookie crumbles and the way it landed, and the Big Ten and SEC are on top, and for the foreseeable future, that's going to be the case. I mean, they're going to gobble up what they want of the ACC, and then, the Big Ten or the Big 12's best bet is just to get the best teams they can that fall to them out of the ACC and try and get in the playoffs and win some games.
In this other narrative that people are pushing out there, like the Olympic sports are going to go to regionals, like they're going to be played in their own regions, like UCLA baseball is going to be back to playing Pacific Coast baseball teams and not Big Ten teams, and the Olympic sports are going to the regions. I don't think any of that is possible either. The Big Ten brought in these teams to bring in all their Olympic sports. The Big Ten's not going to get rid of their Big Ten network. The SEC is not going to get rid of their SEC network. They need live content to fill up those networks. It produces a lot of exposure for non-revenue sports. Why would just because what happened in the ACC, I think some college football reporters are losing their minds over this.
Yeah, well, I mean, blood on the front page, Greg, that always sells. So I will add this, Greg, before I get off here and let somebody else call in. You can have regional things in the Big Ten.
Yep.
If the Big Ten just expands to 24 teams,
yeah,
you're going to add 2 more West Coast teams, probably Stanford and Cal, and those teams can play each other more frequently to reduce the travel. Same thing if you add a Miami. You add a Miami at Georgia Tech and North Carolina. You reduce the travel. So there's ways we can do things regionally while still maintaining a conference's identity.
Yeah. All right, man.
But that's it. I'll let somebody else call in and just remember Wild Ute was wrong.
You got it. You got it. Appreciate it, sir. Great call. Mowing. The Buckeyes are in a lot of trouble at the Shoe, October 4th. Remember the date. Circle the date on your calendar. October 4th at the Shoe. The Buckeyes are in a lot of trouble, my boys. In a lot of trouble. Okay.
Call from
Rick.
Rick is on the line. Rick, the floor is yours. Thanks for calling.
Hey, I need you to pick up the bat phone and give a call to BTM.
What would be the reason?
Well, I'm standing here on the tarmac waiting for one of these planes to come in.
Yeah, that's a good. You know what? Maybe I will get a hold of him.
Well, that would be great because I've been hearing 442211 for so long, and 9 games in the SEC for so long. I'm starting to chomp at the bit.
Yeah, I think the 9 games is going to happen because Sankey said it in public. Go ahead.
No, Sankey said in public what?
He said in public recently that he favors the 9 game. Remember, before that, he kept going, well, half of our conference wants 8, the other half 9. But just recently, he came out in public and said he favors the 9 game conference, the change to the 9 football games. And because he said that in public, I think that means it's going to happen.
Okay, that's very positive. Yeah, he's probably twisting a couple more arms.
Yeah.
Okay, great then. Yeah, that's really all I had. Now I look forward to your next update on that.
Yep, I hope I will get a hold of BTM. I talk to him probably twice a week, so. All righty,
Thanks very much.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it. Great call. If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. Subscribe and turn on those notifications because we can come on live at any time. We do not have a set schedule here at Peek Around the Corner. Breaking news, we come on. If we get our own little information, we come on live. So we can come on at any time. So subscribe, open up those notifications, smash that like button.
Call from
JD.
JD, the floor is yours. How you doing, sir?
Fine, sir. How about yourself?
Good.
Listen to your conversation, and I've been a little bit in and out, so if I get anything wrong, by all means, correct me.
Yeah.
But go in a little bit of a different direction. I don't think we're going to see any shortage of these Super League proposals.
I would imagine.
Private equity is dying to get involved in college football.
Private capital.
And you have presented that.
Yep.
But I don't know if maybe you have talked about it in this way. The second most viewed sport in the country is college football.
Mm-hmm.
Look at like Major League Baseball, hockey, and don't get me wrong, their seasons are much, much longer. So there's a lot more opportunities for sponsorships and so on. But look at the salaries of NBA, of Major League Baseball, of hockey. And again, I understand you can't, it's not apples to apples. There's a lot of other factors, and I get it. Private equity sees the profitability and how much money can be made, and that's why there is going to be a continuous onslaught of them trying to get involved, because they're probably looking at the way college football is set up, and all they see is the billions of unrealized revenue that could be achieved. And I'm not saying millions, I'm saying billions, and I don't mean that on a yearly basis, but over a somewhat reasonable period of time. That's why it's not going to stop. And eventually, I think you're right that conferences aren't going to give up their autonomy just because investors want to come in and get even richer. But they're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they get their way in. And once they get their way in, I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. I think it's going to be a little of both. A lot of other teams are going to get pushed out, but I don't know. By the week, I changed my opinion as far as how this would go. I think that you're either going to have the SEC and the Big Ten grow to a certain level and they control everything, or there's going to be a Power 3. But I don't know. But I'm looking at it like Major League Baseball. It doesn't have the average viewership of, and again, their season is a lot longer. But look at their salaries. I mean, look at so many of this, even NBA teams, look at their salaries. And then you have college football, they're arguing over $10 million in some aspects, 10 or 15 million. So I think I probably about 6 months ago, I thought a Super League was inevitable. Kind of leaning towards your side that, like I said, the conferences aren't going to get the autonomy, or they're not going to give up their autonomy. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
If you notice, JD, we've had a couple reported stories of the Big 10, Tony Petitti having a lot last rounds of bids, when it sounds like it was a little bit of a private investment taking over some Big Ten events. So a little bit of a private capital, private investor type of deal. Nothing like the Big 12, but a small deal. It sounds like that's happening. That sounds like that, that's going to come in at a conference level, correct? You got the Big 12. We got breaking news so many days ago. Ross Dellinger, Brett Yormark, going to have decisions in the next coming weeks. There are 3 private capital out there, bids. Sounds like Redbird Capital is in the lead. So that is private capital knocking on the door, and it's going to come in at a conference level in the Big 12. We might see that with the ACC. We might see that with the SEC. We might see it come in at a school level. But again, when people are talking about Super League, right, they're talking about private capital coming in at a Super League level, right? Everybody involved. Well, and again, all the evidence are pointing the other way. The Big 12, it looks like it hasn't officially happened yet, but the Big 12 looks like they're weeks away from likely signing a private capital deal because they perceive it's the best interest of their institutions in their conference. Sounds like the Big 10 might be doing a smaller deal. These conferences signing this deal, they're going to be showing more commitment to each other. If you have the SEC going to 9 conference games, if you have the Big 10 and the SEC having a scheduling agreement together, there's a very good chance that more money is going to go to the Big Ten and the SEC schools. And there's a very good chance that those media deals are going to be extended by a couple of years with their media partners, because they're going to want, the media companies are going to want something in return for handing out more money. So everything, these big capital they're knocking on the door, baby. They want in, and they are getting in. But are they going to get in this big, huge Super League where they're going to fund all this money and they're going to get a whole bunch of money back because they're all going to be under one media agreement and blah, 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 blah. I don't see it happening, JD. Let me know how wrong I got it.
No, I mean, I think if the Power Two is, let's just say they decide not to expand, I think the likelihood of a Super League increases. If they go ahead and decide to expand, bring in another, whatever the number is, if they both decide to go to 24 or whatever, and I'm not saying that would happen. I'm just saying whatever it is, or if they build up the third conference. The more value brand teams that are left out there, if you bring them in under the umbrella, the less likely a Super League would ever happen because you wouldn't need it. I
agree with that, and that's why I don't think expansion's quite over for the SEC and the Big Ten.
Well, to me, the likelihood of a Super League dropped significantly when the collaboration with the Power Two took, when that became a public, when it went public, to me that was the process of shooting down. That's the biggest reason to combat a Super League, is to collaborate with the two top conferences. That's exactly what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. You're trying to control the sport yourself rather than have investors come in and take it over. One of my first phone calls with you, actually might have been my first phone call with you. The thing that I talked about was the plans of the networks. The networks are trying to be the owners of college football. The NFL has massive viewership numbers. The league, of course, and then the individual teams own the sports, and the networks are their media partners. The networks want to serve almost like the owners, and they understand there is just a vast unrealized revenue potential out there, and they're trying to grow this. And that's exactly what private equity. You look at the salaries for an Otani, you look at the salaries for some of these other guys, and again, I understand it's different. Their seasons are longer, or there's other revenue possibilities, but if you are able to build a bigger model for college football, can you imagine how much more money there is? Can you imagine how much more valuable the sponsorships, how much more they would pay, how many more sponsorships, and then plus your NIL is marketable. You could use the NIL, and investors can come in and they pay the freight, but at the same time they're using the money that's going in. It's almost like depositing it into a bank. There's just so many things that are so many different ways to make money, and college football has not done really that good of a job of it over the years. And again, that's why private equity, they're just licking their chops. They can't wait. So you're going to get plenty more of these Super League proposals come out, and I know you're going to shoot them down. And I don't mean that condescending. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm starting to side with you on this.
Again, if you're talking Super League where the Big Ten and the SEC adds a few teams and they break away, yes. But a Super League of 40 teams and they don't all constitute SEC, Big Ten, or if you're looking at a 48 to 60 team Super League, I don't see it happening. But you know what? If it does happen, I will take the L, JD. I will take the loss.
My opinion changes every couple of months, but I haven't.
That's fine.
I haven't seen any proposal that when they first came out with it this past year. It really caught my attention, and I thought there would be more interest, but then when it faded really quickly and it got shot down really fast, I'm like, okay, yeah, like you said, the Power Two is not interested in giving up their control, and right now they run the sport for the most part. So, but all right, thank you so much, sir.
You got it, buddy. Appreciate the call,
the
JD.
show. Thank you,
Mr. Seminole.
Have a good night. Thanks.
Great call by JD Curtis, Mr. Michigan Wolverine. Hey, Greg, college football needs all of the schools to be around. The Big Ten and SEC needs each other, and the smaller schools, regarding Northwestern, their new stadium will make a super impact because TV is the future. Watch. Thank you, Curtis. I appreciate the incredible generosity. Wow. My goodness. Thank you, Curtis. One of the original PATC family members. Again, people, the Northwestern football stadium, 35,000. So people think it's not going to be that big a deal. Northwestern's not going to be on TV that much. Okay, fine. But from a Northwestern perspective, they built that stadium with the idea. I mean, they are original Big Ten member. I mean, they do billions of dollars worth of business with other Big Ten schools, and they're going to build a football stadium with no debt. They got a beautiful facility, and they're not going to be in the football conference anymore. And their corporate office is right there. I am guilty of something here. I'm guilty. I'm biased. Now, you guys know I rip on the Big Ten. I rip on Tony Petitti. I rip on Kevin Warren. I rip on my own beloved Golden Gophers. I'm very difficult on the Big Ten along with everybody else. I get everybody mad at me, including Big Ten fans, including Curtis, Michigan Wolverines, when I picked on them because of the in-person scouting. I call it like I see it. Completely authentic. No strings attached. Right or wrong. But maybe I'm biased here. Maybe because I grew up reading. There was this big book in the library in Lakeview Elementary School in Robbinsdale, Minnesota. A thick book like that where you open it up and it had the history of the Big Ten Football Conference. And each year, it had pages where each year it showed the standings. And then it had the schedules of each team and who they played and who they beat. And I remember it was like the last year in the book was like 1978. Because, I would have been in fourth grade in Lakeview in 1978, about that. And I remember that book, man. I read the history of every team throughout the years. Big Ten. And it's only grown since then. But I get it. Maybe because I'm so biased, because I've seen Northwestern and Purdue. I can't remember Oregon State and Washington State did not get kicked out of the Pac-12. Everybody left them, right? I mean, for anybody to get kicked out of the Big Ten doesn't even compute. Even if there is this new entity called the Super League, and it's not the Big Ten and the SEC controlling it, which I don't know how that would work. But Colorado, Arizona State, Utah, Oklahoma State, North Carolina State, Duke. I mean, a lot of good football, a lot of good brands, a lot of good institutions outside the Big Ten and the SEC. But I can't see any of those replacing Northwestern and how entangled they are with the other Big Ten universities. Northwestern get a lot of their students from the East Coast. That also brings value to North. They've got I don't know, guys. Maybe I'm just too biased to see the truth that's going to be coming, right? But I don't think so. I don't think so. I think, going back to the title of our show, the so-called oncoming creation of a Super League is one bad joke. I do not see it happening. Unless it's the Big Ten and the SEC taking a few more teams and having a breakaway. And then you want to call it a Super League, call it a Super League. That I would agree with. And I have since I started this live show, since I started this YouTube channel. But a Super League of 60 teams, of 48 teams, of 40 teams, but a couple of SEC and Big Ten schools are no longer part of it. I think it's a bad joke. And it is really catching on right now. Really catching on. These narratives from football reporters, the people on X, the football YouTube channels, I don't think it's going to happen. Put down your comments and thoughts after this live show is over. We're going to be wrapping up here. I want to thank everybody. We've been on the air for over 2 hours. I want to thank Ryan, Willie, Expedition Greg, and the incredible generosity of Mr. Curtis, Michigan Wolverine, 2024 undisputed national champions. Thank you, Curtis. Appreciate it. Jose, Steel Austin, Rob Allen, Florida Man, Arne God, I appreciate all of you coming on in. We've been on the air for a little bit over 2 hours. And again, please subscribe to our channel. Have those notifications turned on, because if there is any breaking news tonight or early tomorrow morning or during the afternoon tomorrow, we are going to be coming on live. We are going to be coming on live with little to no warning at Flug Empire. If you see on the ticker at the bottom of the screen, follow me on X at Flug Empire. Sometimes we give you a few minute warning that we're going to be coming on live. Breaking news, we are coming. This is going to be a very eventful month of March. Buckle up, brace for impact. Until next time, from all of us at PATC, to all of you, please you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.